Here, my good man, take this. And by the way, when you go, shut the door and close it behind you." "Very good, your Excellency," the porter bawled in jest. The orator drank off half his glass and continued. "However, let us leave aside the philosophical, social, and economic aspects of the question. I do not wish to fatigue your attention. I must nevertheless point out that our profession very closely approaches the idea of that which is called art. Into it enter all the elements which go to form art: vocation, inspiration, fantasy, inventiveness, ambition, and a long and arduous apprenticeship to the science. From it is absent virtue alone, concerning which the great Karamzin wrote with such stupendous and fiery fascination. Gentlemen, nothing is further from my intention than to trifle with you and waste your precious time with idle paradoxes, but I cannot avoid expounding my idea briefly. To an outsider's ear it sounds absurdly wild and ridiculous to speak of the vocation of a thief. However, I venture to assure you that this vocation is a reality. There are men who possess a peculiarly strong visual memory, sharpness and accuracy of eye, presence of mind, dexterity of hand, and above all a subtle sense of touch, who are, as it were, born into God's world for the sole and special purpose of becoming distinguished card sharpers. The pickpocketer's profession demands extraordinary nimbleness and agility, a terrific certainty of movement, not to mention a ready wit, a talent for observation, and a strained attention. Some have a positive vocation for breaking open safes. From their tenderest childhood they are attracted by the mysteries of every kind of complicated mechanism: bicycles, sewing machines, clockwork toys, and watches. Finally, gentlemen, there are people with a hereditary animus against private property. You may call this phenomenon degeneracy, but I tell you that you cannot entice a true thief, and thief by vocation, into the prose of honest vegetation by any gingerbread reward, or by the offer of a secure position, or by the gift of money, or by a woman's love. Because there is here a permanent beauty of risk, a fascinating abyss of danger, the delightful sinking of the heart, the impetuous pulsation of life, the ecstasy. You are armed with the protection of the law, by locks, revolvers, telephones, police, and soldiery. But we only by our dexterity, cunning, and fearlessness. We are the foxes, and society is a chicken run, guarded by dogs. Are you aware that the most artistic and gifted natures in our villages become horse thieves and poachers? What would you have? Life is so meagre, so insipid, so intolerably dull to eager and high-spirited souls. I pass on to inspiration. Gentlemen, doubtless you have read of the thefts that were supernatural in design and execution. In the headlines of the newspapers they are called an amazing robbery, or an ingenious swindle, or again, a clever ruse of the gangsters. In such cases our bourgeois paterfamilias waves his hands and exclaims, "What a terrible thing! If only their abilities were turned to good, their inventiveness, their amazing knowledge of human psychology, their self-possession, their fearlessness, their incomparable histrionic powers. What extraordinary benefits they would bring to the country." But it is well known that the bourgeois paterfamilias was specially devised by heaven to utter commonplaces and trivialities. I myself sometimes, we thieves are a sentimental people, I confess, I myself sometimes admire a beautiful sunset in Alexandra Park or by the seashore, and I am always certain beforehand that someone near me will say with infallible aplomb, "Look at it! If it were put into a picture, no one would ever believe it." I turn round, and naturally I see a self-satisfied, full-fed paterfamilias who delights in repeating someone else's silly statement as though it were his own. As for our dear country, the bourgeois paterfamilias looks upon it as though it were a roast turkey. If you've managed to cut the best part of the bird for yourself, eat it quietly in a comfortable corner and praise God. But he's not really the important person. I was led away by my detestation of vulgarity, and I apologize for the digression. The real point is that genius and inspiration, even when they are not devoted to the service of the Orthodox Church, remain rare and beautiful things. Progress is a law, and theft too has its creation. Finally, Our profession is by no means as easy and pleasant as it seems at first glance. It demands long experience, constant practice, slow and painful apprenticeship. It comprises in itself hundreds of supple, skilful processes that the cleverest juggler cannot compass. That I may not give you only empty words, gentlemen, I will perform a few experiments before you now. I ask you to have every confidence in the demonstrators. We are all at present in the enjoyment of legal freedom, and though we are all usually watched, and every one of us is known by face, and our photographs adorn the albums of all detective departments, for the time being we are not under the necessity of hiding ourselves from anybody. If any one of you should recognize any of us in the future under different circumstances, we ask you earnestly, always, to act in accordance with your professional duties and your obligations as citizens. In grateful return for your kind attention, we have decided to declare your property inviolable, and to invest it with thieves' taboo. However, I proceed to business. The orator turned round and gave an order. "Sesoi the Great, will you come this way?" An enormous fellow with a stoop, whose hands reached to his knees, without a forehead or neck, like a big, fair Hercules, came forward. He grinned stupidly and rubbed his left eyebrow in his confusion. "Can't do nothing here," he said hoarsely. The gentleman in the sandy suit spoke for him, turning to the committee. "Gentlemen, before you stands a respected member of our association. His specialty is breaking open safes, iron strong-boxes, and other receptacles for monetary tokens. In his night work he sometimes avails himself of the electric current of the lightning installation for fusing metals. Unfortunately, he has nothing on which he can demonstrate the best items of his repertoire. He will open the most elaborate lock irreproachably. By the way, this door here, it's locked, is it not?" Everyone turned to look at the door on which a printed notice hung. "Stage door, strictly private." "Yes, the door's locked, evidently," the chairman agreed. "Admirable. Sesoi the Great, will you be so kind?" "'Tain't nothing at all," said the giant leisurely. He went close to the door, shook it cautiously with his hand, took out of his pocket a small bright instrument, bent down to the keyhole, made some almost imperceptible movements with the tool, and suddenly straightened and flung the door wide in silence. The chairman had his watch in his hands. The whole affair took only 10 seconds. "Thank you, Sesoi the Great," said the gentleman in the sandy suit politely. "You may go back to your seat." But the chairman interrupted in some alarm. "Excuse me, this is all very interesting and instructive, but is it included in your esteemed colleague's profession to be able to lock the door again?" "Ah, mille pardons," the gentleman bowed hurriedly. "It slipped my mind. Sesoi the Great, would you oblige?" The door was locked with the same adroitness and the same silence. The esteemed colleague waddled back to his friends, grinning. "Now I will have the honour to show you the skill of one of our comrades who is in the line of picking pockets in theatres and railway stations," continued the orator. "He is still very young, but you may to some extent judge from the delicacy of his present work of the heights he will attain by diligence. Yasha!" A swarthy youth in a blue silk blouse and long glaced boots, like a gypsy, came forward with a swagger, fingering the tassels of his belt, and merrily screwing up his big, impudent black eyes with yellow whites. "Gentlemen," said the gentleman in the sandy suit persuasively, "I must ask if one of you would be kind enough to submit yourself to a little experiment. I assure you this will be an exhibition only, just a game." He looked round over the seated company. The short, plump Karaite, black as a beetle, came forward from his table. "At your service," he said amusedly. "Yasha!" The orator signed his head. Yasha came close to the solicitor. On his left arm, which was bent, hung a bright-coloured, figured scarf. "Suppose you're in church or at the bar in one of the halls, or watching a circus," he began in a sugary, fluent voice. "I see straight off, there's a toff. Excuse me, sir, suppose you're the toff. There's no offence, just means a rich gent, decent enough, but don't know his way about. First, what's he likely to have about him? All sorts. Most likely a ticker and a chain. Whereabouts